Summer break for Formula One ended this weekend. With the Belgian Grand Prix in Spa this morning, new rules took effect. These rules include changes to clutch and communication procedures for the race's start. The goal is ramping up excitement in the sport. The FIA intends to make drivers more responsible for their starts. As we fans have recently seen, a good start can be a critical difference in a big loss or a big win. The new rules promise a necessary and exciting infusion of unpredictability for F1. Two recent races all but prove the certainty of the new rules to spice up the sport. Fans have seen clear evidence that a good start is critical to success. All season, we have been bored with the expected Mercedes 1-2 starts and finishes. Any break in that monotony is welcomed by fans, including dramatic starts by other teams and poor starts by Mercedes. Lately, we have been lucky. At Silverstone and the Hungaroring, two different teams got the jump on Mercedes at the start. These starts not only changed the pace of the race, but also shook up the faces on the podium. As Daniel Johnson at the Telegraph reminds, Budapest saw two Red Bull drivers on the podium and not a single Mercedes, a first this season. First of these changes is technical changes to the clutch setup. Johnson calls this a manual start. This basically means that the clutch bite point will not be allowed to be altered after leaving the pits on race day. Lawrence Barretto at Autosport points out that changes to the clutch bite point could be made on the starting grid with minutes to go before the start. New rules have written in precautions to avoid any help on the start grid. This new situation makes the driver responsible for finding the right clutch setup. Finding this is crucial for a solid start. Dangerous stalling in a crowded grid is unlikely because of anti-stall technology, but other problems are possible. Essentially, this puts the driver's race in their own hands. By putting the start in the hands of the drivers, by these changes to the clutch rules, we have a promise of some very interesting races. The technical changes will take a prominent role moving forward in team preparations, and drivers will have to work hard to get used to a new system. As I mentioned, the recent races are shining examples of the importance of a quality start. The usually dominant Mercedes drivers have experienced a pair of poor starts. In spite of recent hard racing, the Mercedes drivers could not fully recover, and neither managed a podium finish in Budapest. These races have been discussed as the two most exciting all season, and have brought Ferrari into better contention for the championship. Even Mercedes #1 Lewis Hamilton suggested the importance of starts after Hungary. The Telegraph reports his claims that a decent start there could have been a very different race. Along with clutch changes, new rules restrict team-to-driver communications at the start. These new regulations are a part of the regime to increase excitement. Barretto at Autosport points out that the most recent rules allowed the talk throughout the build-up to the start. This includes talk on the starting grid. Johnson at the Telegraph reports that the new rules ban communications during the build-up, accepting warnings critical to safety. Fans have been called for decreases in team interference on the driver. This is a step in that direction, focusing on avoiding using radio to give the driver much help in finding the clutch bite point. It could be argued that the best drivers already need very little communication from teams. Lessening radio contact for these drivers would then have very little impact on their race. The Telegraph cites Hamilton's suggestion that he is one such driver. He claims a decrease in communication would have no impact on his driving. No doubt this was meant to be confidence in his abilities. As the lack of communication from new regulations is focused on starts, we have to consider Hamilton's starts. He has recently shown an ability to struggle with his starts, even on current regulation. To say less communication would make no change could be true, but not necessarily in a way that Mercedes can be proud of. The nature of the changes was not an arbitrary decision by the FIA. A variety of factors were considered, with very specific rules in mind. James Allen, a BBC correspondent, writes that decisions on new rules now and for the future are informed by fans. Fan surveys for improvement were taken on how to make the sport more exciting for the spectators. The key response was more in the hands of the drivers. Restricting outside help through radio communication is meant to do just that. BBC Sports chief Formula One writer Andrew Benson points out that the focus on starts so soon is focused on spicing up a largely bland season. The focus is boosting excitement and unpredictability. It could be argued that fans may not be the best source of input for improving a sport moving forward. More critically, a fan survey is not the right starting point for making changes to rules. As a fan, I have to concede this is not an empty argument. For example, Allen reports that one consideration of the survey being discussion for 2017 is bigger, meaner-looking cars. This has very little impact on the sport or the race. To take time and money to make such changes could be construed as waste. However, fan opinion has proved critical to the survival of the sport even just this season. Let us not forget the cancellation of this year's German Grand Prix. Fans decided the price for tickets wasn't worth the show, and the Grand Prix couldn't afford to happen this year from low ticket sales. The fact is, Formula One is a business, and a business depending on ticket sales. Spectators buy tickets when they feel the spectacle is worth the price. Who ought to know better than fans what makes the sport interesting to watch? Spa was fairly clean, but Monza and other upcoming races may not be. New rules are often uncomfortable, but they regularly draw backlash. Change can be disagreeable, especially on short notice. Taking recent history and fan desire into account, these changes are virtually guaranteed to produce a more interesting season. The initial post-change period might be a messy one, a frustrating one, even for top teams and drivers. At this point, it's impossible to truly say. With practice and time, we could very well find a very different championship for the rest of the season from a few small changes. What we do know is that it should be a much more interesting and exciting race right from the start.